Hello and welcome once again to Nexus Extra. This week we are looking at how the United States closed the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, and how the Chinese responded by closing one of the American consulates in China. It was all about allegations of spying at the Chinese consulate, and we want to get into this a great deal more with Prudence Bushnell, or perhaps I should call her Madam Ambassador. She was the US ambassador to Kenya in the 1990s, and in 2000s, she was the US ambassador to Guatemala. Prudence Bushnell, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Madam Ambassador, all right?
Sure. It's a privilege these days. When I returned to the United States, I became an ordinary woman again, which meant I became invisible. So Ambassador is wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you've earned it. Let me ask you, what do you make of those pictures coming out of Houston, where you see fires and things being burned just before, well, they had 72 hours, didn't they? They were given, the Chinese consulate staff were given 72 hours to vacate. What do you make of those pictures?
Well, they're unnecessary. Frankly, the United States and China have a complicated relationship. We are condemned to live with each other for a very long time, and it doesn't help when you have the kinds of theatrical, dramatic confrontations that we're seeing, which provoke but don't necessarily resolve anything.
Well, I'm actually literally asking about the burning of documents. Since you worked at embassies and consulates and so on, was that something that you trained for?
Do you know, we used to burn documents in the 1980s, since when I first arrived. Very few people burn documents anymore. That's what shredders are for. Now, so they should have been shredding madly, not burning madly. Plus, however, if you burn and it is known, you certainly get far more attention than if you're sitting in the back room shredding.
That's a very good point. And in fact, that is why we are looking at this story, because frankly, the visuals were something you don't see every day. You say this is really as a result of theatrics. And I'm sure that is a somewhat cloaked barb at President Trump. Let's look at the substance of what the Trump administration is saying then. According to the Department of Justice and other departments, the consulate was being used, as is other Chinese consulates in the United States, to coordinate spying on various institutions and businesses, including the elite universities in the United States. Do you doubt the Department of Justice in this case?
No, I suspect that's perfectly fair. But frankly, diplomats have been doing that for centuries. So we have to put this in context. That yes, there is a problem. The Chinese have clearly gone over the line with the machoing up their foreign policy and getting disturbing or not respecting our intellectual property rights. Their behavior in the consulate, I don't doubt, is over the line. So you stop it.
The Trump administration says that it went past going just over the line. It is actually a threat now to national security. Would you still object to closing a consulate on that basis?
Yes, closing the consulate is an act of theater. It is not as if expelling Chinese diplomats is going to keep Chinese military intelligence or whatever from paying people to hand over secrets. So if you want to pretend that it is the members of the Chinese diplomatic corps who put on masks and went lurking around at medical institutions, then fine. Frankly, I doubt it. And I don't think closing the consulate does anything but make a public spectacle. And if that's what we want, then that certainly is a decision the White House has made. We'll see what happens next.
Can we just reflect on your experience as an ambassador, particularly in Kenya? You and a number of your staff, of course, managed to survive a terrible attack by Al Qaeda on the US Embassy in Kenya. Can you describe that day for us?
It was a beautiful Friday morning. It was the day every staff member looks forward to because we were going to have a staff meeting. You know how much people like that. I happened not to have attended the meeting because I was meeting across the very small parking lot with the Kenyan Minister of Commerce, whose office was on the 21st floor. We had just gotten through having tea and photo ops and the word to the press. The press had just left. We heard a boom, which I took to be a construction boom because we are on a very busy street in downtown Nairobi. Almost everyone else in the room went to the window. For whatever reason, I was the last one to go to the window and had just taken a few steps forward when a freight train percussion blast of energy threw me back. The ceiling was falling down, the building was shaking, and I honestly thought I was going to die. A very dreamy, oh, you're going to die, as every cell in my body went into total panic mode, holding on for dear life. And then I think I passed out for a minute or two, I don't know. Got up, an American colleague had come back into the room, and together we went down 20 flights of stairs. I had no idea that this was an attack on our embassy. I frankly thought it was a Kenyan on Kenyan attack, and it was only when I got out and saw the devastation of the parking lot and the almost literal melting of one of our walls in the rear of the embassy that I realized what had happened.
And how many colleagues did you lose in the blast?
We lost 46 colleagues, 34 Kenyan colleagues and 12 Americans. The total number of dead in that instant was 213 in Nairobi. There was a almost simultaneous attack on our embassy in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, in which 9 people were killed.
What were your feelings once you'd come round from the blast? Did you have the urge to leave or to stay?
Oh my goodness. It did not occur to me to leave. And although the Americans were all the American employees at Post were given the opportunity to curtail, none of them did. As I was going down the stairs of the high-rise building, I kept thinking to myself, I just need to get into the medical unit and I will be taken care of. It was when I got outside that I realized I had better get in gear because there was no one who was going to take care of me. And it didn't occur to me to do anything but begin to lead people with people to get out of this chaos.
How did President Bill Clinton react? Did he get in touch with you immediately?
He did. Well, and it was about an hour. Frankly, I have no idea how long it took me to get down the stairs, but got down the stairs, and then eventually I was maybe an hour, 2 hours later at our crisis room that we had created, and I got a phone call from the president. He said, "Prue, how are you?" And I thought, you know what? There's some guy who's put a 3x5 card saying she calls herself Prue, because how else would he know it? I said, "Fine, Mr. President. My heart is bursting with pride and melting with sorrow for what is going on here." And his next words were, "Secure the perimeter."
Right.
I say, what? The irony of that is that for 2 years prior to the bombing, I had been sending notes and telegrams of alarm back to Washington saying this is an insecure, vulnerable building because we did we did not meet the Department of State's own security regulations to have a setback. And I had been told to stop nagging, end quote, about the security setback. And the first question the president asked is provide security, perimeter security. Yeah, that would have helped a couple of years before.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's quite serious, actually. Who do you blame for not listening to you about that?
The focus on taking care of policy before taking care of people. I blame the delegation of leadership responsibilities. The security responsibilities were put in an entirely separate part of the department, and those people never spoke to the policy people because the policy people were too busy going to meetings and outdoing themselves with brilliant ideas. So
would the US Secretary of State have been ultimately responsible for the security of the embassy in Nairobi?
The person who is personally responsible for the security of embassies overseas is the ambassador. We are one of the few Senate-confirmed people, I think the only ones actually, to get a job description, imagine that, a job description and assignment of personal responsibility in a machine-signed letter from the President of the United States. I had the responsibility.
Prudence, let me ask you a rather controversial question, but I need to ask it since we have the opportunity. Did you ever think in your career that US foreign policy was provoking, in a way, some of the extremists, or in a way providing them justification for their actions? We know that under the president that you served, President Bill Clinton, for example, that the only pharmaceutical factory in Sudan was bombed. Many people say it was just a way of distracting the world's attention from his own scandal at the time. The question is, do you ever consider that the US foreign policy might be to blame for some of the violence that Americans have to endure?
Well, we certainly went through a period of time in the 1950s where we provoked an enormous amount of violence, including a 35-year internal conflict in Guatemala. So no, it does not surprise me that the US government engages in provocative acts. I can only take at face value that the intelligence community thought that it was, that they were, the pharmaceutical factory was producing chemicals as well as pharmaceuticals. And I will also take on face value that it was a retaliative attack rather than wag the dog means of bypassing or distracting public attention. I think that was convenient, but I know some of the people involved in making those decisions, and I don't want to second guess their politics and decision making. The fact of the matter is, we did a knee-jerk reaction, which is to let's hurl some missiles at somebody if they hurt us. So we threw missiles into Sudan and Afghanistan, and it didn't accomplish a thing. We then went back to business as usual until 9/11, and that changed the world. I have always felt that had the intelligence community put together all of the intelligence they had on bin Laden before the 1998 bombing, we could have avoided it. We certainly could have avoided 9/11 had they learned from mistakes in 1998.
Let's just bring ourselves up to date with your career now. And after many years as a diplomat and as an ambassador, you are now a teacher, a mentor for leadership. Can you tell me how your experience has informed your teaching, and what are the important principles, the most important principles, if you like, for leadership?
Yes, I am a huge proponent of leadership, and boy, do we need it now, not just from top down, but bottom up. The clearest definition of leadership that I use comes from Peter Northouse, who says leadership is a process. It's not a person and it's not an event. It's a process by which one individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. It is my assessment, having been in the Foreign Service, that policy people often see absolutely no reason to use leadership. It's the brilliance of the idea. Well, that's fine, but then where do you go from there? How do you get the brilliant idea implemented to create the change? And that's where leadership came in. And we used it that is the members of the other US government agencies represented in Kenya, used it to accomplish wonderful things in Kenya. And if I have time, I will give you one. The 1997 presidential elections in Kenya were coming up with a background of violence every single time. We had the opportunity to either bring in international non-governmental organizations to serve as election observers. And then we said, wait a minute, why don't we spend the money training Kenyans in election observation? So we trained 26,000 Kenyans. We then went to our diplomatic colleagues around Nairobi, of whom there were many, and said, how would you like to be part of the international election monitors? The Romanian ambassador called me up, may I join your club? The Hungarian, it was wonderful. That's the kind of thing you can do when you put policy and leadership together. And I hope we see a day when that will happen.
Well, Prudence Bushnell, thank you for being our special guest on Nexus Extra today. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Till next week then, goodbye. Well, thanks for watching our program. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and even subscribe.